Because of the manifesto, people seem to think there's no documentation in an Agile environment. Can you explain why that's not true and why documentation is still important?
Right. That's a big part of my talk because it's a very confusing point, the third Agile statement about working software over documentation. Two things about that. Comprehensive documentation, it is true, we do write less documentation than we used to, or we spend less time writing words. We might be substituting diagrams, we might be substituting video, we might be finding another way. We might do a blog post instead of writing formal documentation. But the bigger issue is that when the Agile Manifesto was written, they were focused on internal development. They were not focused on customer-facing materials. So when they said documentation, what they were talking about were requirements, they were talking about specifications, they were talking about the project documents that would have to get written before anything ever got coded. That's the part that Agile releases and says, let's just find a better way. Where that puts us is that the customer-facing documentation is actually part of the working software. So it's part of the whole experience that they have when they get the software. They have a problem, they hit a snag, what happens? You know, do they get any guidance? What does the help look like? What does the support look like? It's all part of the larger experience that they're paying for. So we totally belong in there, and that's a huge area of growth, is that most companies don't really understand how to make that work in their Agile process.
I didn't even think about video as part of the documentation process. Has technology changed the way that things are documented, in your opinion?
Yes.
Or rather, how people consume content,
right,
or their preferred way of consuming content.
Right, and the answer is our job is to deliver whatever content solves the problem. And if you are going to do text, make sure that you're delivering text in a way that is just the right amount at just the right point in time to solve the problem. We are actually starting to change the language around documentation. You'll hear now information experience, that's a term Atlassian likes to use now, information interface, but the point is it's the information, it's the cognitive part of the software, and however you deliver it, visually, auditorily, text, all of that is part of the entire package that we are responsible for delivering. So you can see that the technical writers are getting very, very stretched. And it's also about opening up that it's not just about the product documentation, but it gets into before the sale, which is the marketing and the prospects. What do they see? What do they get? And it's also after the sale, the support folks and the materials that they get. And so now we're crossing silos, and Agile is breaking down the organization, flattening the organization. And the technical writer needs to be everywhere.
What is DocOps, and did you coin that term?
I did not coin that term. I'm using that term because Computer Associates coined it. They had a huge initiative where they put in a DocOps system. And we mean it to mean the documentation equivalent of DevOps. So DevOps is where you completely break apart all your systems, you re-engineer everything to make it one of those automated IT-generated systems that is that runs itself and heals itself as it goes, as your development process. So this is about how do you do that for documentation? And it's all about messing with your tool stack, but it's also messing with your processes, and sometimes it means letting go of certain things so that you can get other things. When Computer Associates did it, one of the major drivers they had is that they had to translate all of their huge amount of materials in real time. And so if you don't have an automated system to manage that, the cost will simply destroy you as well as the time frame. So that's really what we're talking about, is how to break it all apart and totally rebuild it.
And can you go through the 5 essential pillars of DocOps?
5 essential pillars. I'm going to test my memory now.
Maybe 3.
The first and most important one is agility. And that's what the Computer Associates accomplished with using a wiki, Confluence, which is you have to have a way where it's really easy to jump in and make a change, and that anyone can jump in and make a change. It's actually the third one, the collaborative part. But the point is, as soon as, so the code's drifting along and changing, and it's how quickly can the documentation move in step, so that it's not weeks later, but it can be minutes later from a triggered change. There's continuous integration, which is, that's what we hear about for our code. We have to continuously build and continuously integrate. But the same principle applies to documentation. It used to be the job of the tech writers after I make a change, and now I'm going to go build, and I'm going to go look at it, and no. Totally hands off. It needs to be completely hands-free. It needs to auto-generate, it needs to auto-trigger. And however you do it doesn't matter, but the point is you cannot be spending your time, you the writer, cannot be spending your time doing that. So those three major things, and of course, making it on an agile team, it's like if I get hit by a truck, can someone else jump in, make a change, and can we make our date? Can we close out the sprint? So all of those principles, normal doc tools, that's generally not going to be a system where that's going to work, and that's why things have got to change.
Great, and last question. When you're researching tools to use in an authoring platform, what are some requirements that you should think about?
It totally depends on what your situation is, but I have 4 main categories of requirements you need to look at. One has to do with implementation. Another category is how easy is it for customers to self-serve and get what they want without having to ask for help. Another one is how easy is it for, say, your support people to know that documentation has changed and respond to it, or have a support case and link it to docs and have it all. So it's the non-hand touch thing where notifications just happen. Those are really important. And all the things that you would look for in a DevOps stack, such as there needs to be version control. That's the kind of thing that would go under a requirement for these. You should not have to babysit things. If you need to revert, there needs to be a way to do that. So you can just roll it back.